Before we begin, let me tell you something uncomfortable. No contact won't save you. It won't fix the past, it won't punish them, and it won't destroy their ego. Because distance doesn't break a narcissist, irrelevance does. And today, I'm going to show you the one psychological shift that makes you untouchable to them. A shift far more powerful than disappearing. See, people think cutting communication is enough, but narcissists don't need your presence to feel control. They need your reaction, your emotional signal, your attention, even in the form of hate, fear, or frustration. When you go silent but still think about them, still stalk their socials, still replay old conversations, still argue with them in your mind, you're feeding them from across the galaxy. So, no, no contact isn't victory. Not if you're still plugged into their psychological grid. Let me show you the upgrade. When people talk about going no contact with a narcissist, they imagine it as some kind of magic barrier that instantly fixes everything. They think the moment they block, mute, ignore, or vanish, the narcissist loses power. But what most people never realize is that no contact only changes the outside world. It doesn't automatically change the inner one. And narcissists don't need your physical presence to stay connected to you. They only need a piece of your attention. If you're still thinking about what they meant, replaying their messages, imagining confrontations, checking if they posted something, or wondering if they miss you, then you're still emotionally calibrated to them. Your mind is still tuned to their frequency, even if you never speak again. True power comes from recalibrating your internal world so they no longer control your emotional reactions. No contact is just the first step. Internal neutrality is the actual shift. It means their actions no longer affect your mood. Their silence doesn't make you anxious. Their stories don't make you jealous. Their sudden reappearance doesn't make you hopeful or afraid. You stop interpreting everything they do as a message meant for you. You stop giving them psychic space. When you reach that point internally, something deeper changes than just distance. You stop being a predictable emotional source. You stop sending the energy that feeds their ego. You stop participating in their game without even realizing it. And this is the moment a narcissist truly loses power over you because you're no longer calibrated to their emotional rhythm. You're operating from your own center, not the one they trained you to react from. That shift is what breaks their control, not the block button itself. A narcissist survives on patterns. They study how you react, how you feel, what triggers you, and what pulls you back in. Over time, they build a mental blueprint of your behavior, like a map that lets them predict exactly how to manipulate you. If you get upset easily, they use silence. If you fear abandonment, they disappear. If you crave reassurance, they give validation in small doses. If you argue back, they twist your words until you doubt yourself. Everything they do is designed around the expectation that you will react the same way you always have. Predictability is their control system because it ensures you behave inside the emotional structure they created for you. But the moment you stop reacting the way they anticipate, something in their strategy breaks down. When you don't respond to their bait, when you don't try to prove yourself, when you don't defend, explain, or justify, when you stop chasing answers they'll never give, their entire playbook becomes useless. They lose the ability to manipulate, not because you blocked them, but because you stopped feeding the emotional responses they rely on. Your unpredictability forces them into psychological chaos. Narcissists rely heavily on control to stabilize their fragile ego. And when the predictable reactions disappear, they feel an intense loss of power. They start trying harder to provoke you. They may love bomb, attack, guilt trip, or create drama out of nowhere just to see if you will return to the old predictable version of yourself. But every time you stay calm, unmoved, and unresponsive to the emotional traps they set, their sense of superiority fractures. They can't handle uncertainty because they can't dominate what they can't predict. This is why shifting your emotional pattern is more powerful than disappearing. Silence creates space, but silence on its own still leaves room for emotional conflict. Many people go quiet on a narcissist yet remain emotionally reactive underneath. They wait to see if the narcissist notices. They monitor their social media. They imagine confrontations that never happen. They feel hurt when they don't receive an apology or anxious when the narcissist suddenly reaches out. Silence becomes a performance instead of a transformation. And narcissists can still feel your emotional presence even when you speak no words. What actually impacts them is indifference, because indifference removes the emotional fuel they feed on. It means their messages don't create pressure in your chest. Their silence doesn't make you panic. Their sudden reappearance doesn't throw your day off. Their provocations don't trigger your anger or confusion. Indifference isn't pretending not to care, it's truly reaching a place where they no longer generate a strong internal response. When you reach that state, your energy becomes unpredictable, calm, and self directed. They can't provoke you because your emotional world no longer revolves around their approval or attention. Even if they try to love bomb you, the feeling doesn't land. Even if they try to insult you, it doesn't stick. They become just another person with no special emotional access. This is what becomes unbearable for them. Narcissists survive by influencing your emotions, and when influence collapses, their ego collapses with it. They can handle criticism, arguments, even hate, because all of those still keep you emotionally tied to them. But indifference leaves them with nothing to push against, no reaction to control, no emotion to feed on. Silence can be broken, but indifference makes them feel like they never existed in your emotional world to begin with. People often assume that pulling away from a narcissist automatically removes their power, but absence is just a physical state. Energy is the real currency in any toxic dynamic. A narcissist doesn't need you in the room to drain you. They only need space inside your mind. If you're replaying arguments, imagining what you should have said, wondering if they're thinking of you, questioning your worth because of them, or feeling the emotional aftershocks of their manipulation, then your energy is still being spent on them. You can be miles away, blocked and invisible, yet still emotionally connected in a way that keeps them alive in your internal world. Narcissists sense this energy more than most people realize. They can feel when you're mentally tied to them because your past reactions taught them how deeply you attach. When you stay emotionally activated, even in silence, they still feel powerful. They still feel relevant. They still feel in control of your narrative. But when you shift your energy away from them, not out of anger, but out of a genuine lack of investment, the dynamic changes. Your emotional withdrawal is far more powerful than physical separation. When they no longer receive emotional signals from you, even indirect ones, their confidence begins to fracture. They can handle distance because distance can be reversed. What they can't handle is losing emotional access. It forces them to confront the emptiness they spend their lives running from. They start to feel the absence of your energy as a threat, not because they care deeply about you, but because you served as a psychological resource. When that resource stops flowing, they feel a kind of ego starvation they can't stabilize. This is why your energy matters more than your absence. It's the one thing they can't replace or manipulate once you reclaim it. A narcissist doesn't care about having you in their life in a normal human way. What they care about is access. Access to your mind, your emotions, your reactions, your insecurities, your time, and your attention. Presence is optional. Influence is essential. They don't need to sit beside you to control you. They only need to know they can still affect how you think and feel. This is why many people go no contact yet still feel stuck, because the narcissist continues to live inside their nervous system. If you react to their silence, they still have access. If you wonder what they're doing, they still have access. If you fear their next move, they still have access. If you replay their words or question your worth because of them, they still have access. This access is what feeds their ego because control is their emotional oxygen. Influence allows them to believe that even without communication, they remain significant in your internal world. The moment they sense you breaking free mentally, they panic and try to re enter your thoughts. They'll reappear suddenly, post something targeted, send a confusing message, use someone else to reach you, or create drama that forces you to pay attention. They aren't trying to reconnect. They're trying to confirm they still matter. But when you strip them of influence, their ego suffers a collapse they can't cover up. When you no longer respond as expected, when you don't get emotional over their behavior, when their attempts to provoke you fall flat, they experience a loss of control that feels like an attack on their identity. They don't just lose you, they lose the ability to shape how you feel about them. Influence is the core of their power. And when that dissolves, their ego destabilizes because they no longer have access to the emotional supply they depend on. A narcissist survives by keeping you inside a psychological game you didn't agree to play. They pull you in with charm, create confusion with mixed signals, destabilize you with small emotional cuts, and keep you chasing clarity they will never give. This game only works when you stay emotionally involved, trying to understand their motives, trying to decode their behavior, trying to fix the connection, or trying to make them see your worth. Every time you think about what they meant, every time you try to read between the lines, every time you wonder what you did wrong, you're still participating. The real power doesn't come from blocking them or ignoring them. It comes from mentally checking out of the entire system they built. When you stop looking for meaning in their chaos, when you stop trying to win their approval, when you stop trying to predict their reactions or interpret their silence, you step out of the psychological arena they depend on. They lose the ability to control the narrative because you're no longer a character in the story they're trying to write. You stop giving emotional responses, even internally. You stop reacting to their patterns, even in your mind. You stop playing the role they designed for you. This kind of withdrawal confuses them more than no contact ever could because it's not about distance, it's about detachment. They can't manipulate someone who isn't engaging. They can't destabilize someone who isn't emotionally invested. They can't win a game that you're not playing anymore. When you exit mentally, the dynamic collapses. They're left standing there without an opponent, without an audience, without control. Their ego cracks because the entire system relied on you staying inside the psychological framework they engineered. When you step out, the game ends and they have no power left to use against you. A narcissist's power isn't built on who they are. It's built on what they represent in your mind. Their relevance is the fuel that keeps the connection alive, even after the relationship ends. As long as you still measure your worth through their reactions, as long as you still track their behavior, as long as you still feel the need to prove something to them, they remain important in your inner world. This importance is what keeps their influence alive. Narcissists don't survive on love or closeness. They survive on significance. If they believe they still occupy emotional space inside you, they feel victorious. That's why they create highs and lows, why they give affection and then pull away, why they plant doubts that take months to clear. Every emotional mark keeps them relevant long after they're gone. But the moment their relevance starts collapsing, the entire structure of control begins to crumble. When you stop making them the reference point for your emotions, your choices, and your self-worth, their power dissolves. When you no longer react to their silence or their attention, when you don't feel rushed to respond, when you don't analyze their mixed messages, their role in your world shrinks rapidly. They can feel this collapse because it shows up in the one thing they are hypersensitive to: lack of influence. They lose the unspoken confidence that they still matter to you. They lose the satisfaction of knowing they can affect your mood. They lose the comfort of believing they left a lasting mark. Without relevance, they fade from your emotional landscape, and this fading is what damages their ego the most. They can handle anger, arguments, or pain because those emotions prove they still matter. But when you move forward in a way that doesn't include them mentally or emotionally, they face a kind of invisibility that they cannot tolerate. Their relevance disappears, and with it, the power they once held. A narcissist builds their power by shaping the version of you that is easiest for them to manipulate. They don't control the whole you. They control the version of you that needed reassurance, the version that doubted itself, the version that accepted breadcrumbs as affection, the version that wanted answers, the version that kept trying to fix things that were never broken on your side. This version is who they target because it keeps you small and predictable. As long as you remain that version, they feel superior. As long as you keep responding the same way, they feel irreplaceable. What truly shatters their ego is not when you block them, ignore them, or cut them off, but when you quietly evolve past the identity they depended on. When you become someone who no longer needs their validation, no longer falls for their illusions, no longer feels intimidated by their silence, no longer feels defined by their attention, their entire psychological structure collapses. They lose access, not just to you, but to the emotional blueprint they spent so long creating. When you grow emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, they are forced to see that the version of you they controlled no longer exists. This growth is the one thing they cannot reverse, manipulate, or compete with. It leaves them powerless because the control they once had was rooted in who you used to be. When you step into a stronger identity, when your standards shift, when your self-respect rises, when your peace becomes non-negotiable, they're faced with the one reality they fear most. They didn't break you, they shaped the person who outgrew them. That level of evolution is something their ego cannot handle because it proves that every tactic they used failed in the long run. Their biggest fear is becoming irrelevant, but their deepest wound is realizing you became someone they could never diminish again. When you finally understand that a narcissist's power was never in their presence, but in your emotional calibration to them, everything changes. You stop fighting for closure they'll never give. You stop replaying conversations that were designed to confuse you, and you stop carrying the weight of a person who was never capable of meeting you at the level you deserved. No contact becomes more than distance. It becomes a declaration that your mind, your energy, and your identity are no longer accessible resources. You reclaim the bandwidth they once controlled, and in doing so, you collapse the only system that kept them relevant. Their ego doesn't break because you walked away. Their ego breaks because you stopped orbiting them. You stopped being predictable. You stopped being emotionally available. You stopped playing the role they wrote for you. And when you evolve into a version of yourself that no longer mirrors the one they manipulated, you take away the one thing they could never replace, the emotional power they once held over you. That is what ends their control. That is what crushes their ego. And that is what finally frees you to build a life where your peace is not stolen, your worth is not questioned, and your future is not tied to someone who never deserved access to your inner world in the first place.